Loudmouth George and the Big Race. This book is written and illustrated by Nancy Carlson and features some of our favorite characters like Loudmouth George and Harriet. When you look at the cover and you listen to the title, Loudmouth George and the Big Race, you can guess what the book is going to be about. Now let's get started. "Look," said Harriet, "there's going to be a 2-mile race. I'm going to enter." "Me too," said Ralph. "How about you, George?" Sure," said George. 2 miles will be a breeze for me." That means easy. "Oh, I'm going to start training right now," said Harriet. "Me too," said Ralph. "How about you, George?" You guys can train all you like. I'm going to beat you anyway. I'll start my training tomorrow." That's not very nice of George to say, "I'm going to beat you anyways." That night, George went to bed early. He set his alarm clock for 5 o'clock. That's really early. "Professional runners run early in the morning," he said. But when 5 o'clock came, George couldn't get up. "Smart professional runners run later," he mumbled, and he went back to sleep. It was noon when George finally came downstairs. "Going running, George?" asked his mother. "In the midday sun?" asked George. "Do you want me to get heat stroke? I'll run tonight when it's cooler." But look who is running. There's Harriet. She's out there running. She's already been practicing a lot. What about George? Has he been practicing yet? Nope. After supper, George got interested in a television show. "I'll start training tomorrow," he said. In the morning, George saw Harriet jogging by. "Oh, she looks terrible," said George. "I'd better get out there and show her how it's done." But when George got downstairs, his mother was making pancakes. "I'll wait till after breakfast," said George. After breakfast, George was too full to run. "I'm going to really train hard after supper," he said. "I may even run 10 miles. That night after supper, Uncle Chuck stopped by. "Who wants to go to the movies with me?" he asked. "I do," said George. On their way, Harriet passed them. "Training for the big race?" said Uncle Chuck. "I sure am," said Harriet. "I can run 1.5 miles now. How about you, George?" "You bet," said George. I don't even start my real training until tomorrow." George is showing off or bragging. He's saying, "I'm so good at running." We'll just have to see. The next day, it rained. The day after that, George had swimming lessons. The day after that, it was too windy to run. The day after that, it was too cold. The day after that, it was too hot. George is sure finding a lot of reasons why he can't run. Those are excuses. I think he probably still could run, even if these things were happening. Finally, the day of the big race arrived. Has George practiced for the race? Not at all. "Boy, am I scared," said Harriet. "Not me," said George. "A 2-mile race is nothing for me, just a walk in the park." Wow, he really is showing off and bragging. The racers were off. George ran fast, ahead of everyone. "Just like I thought," he said to himself. "I'm in first place already." But after about 2 blocks, George began to feel a little out of breath. He got tired. First, Harriet passed him, then Ralph. And by the end of the first mile, Almost everyone had passed him. George felt really tired. Finally, he made it to the finish line. Look how tired he is. Just in time to see Harriet get her trophy. She took first place. George sat down under a tree to catch his breath. "Oh, George, I've been looking for you," said Harriet. "How did it go?" Not very well," said George. "My shoes were too tight." I don't think it was because of his shoes. "Oh, don't feel too bad, George," said Harriet. "There's a 3-mile race in 2 weeks. I'm going to start my training this afternoon. Do you want to run with me?" "This afternoon?" said George. "Gee, I don't think so, Harriet. I'm kind of tired." "I'll start training tomorrow." Do you think he's going to? Seems like he can always find an excuse. How did George do during the race? Not very well, because he hadn't practiced. How did Harriet do? Really well. She won. That's because she practiced and practiced a lot. She worked hard. It wasn't easy, but she worked hard and she got better at running, so she won. If you want to get good at something, you have to practice. Even if you're tired, even if it's difficult, even if it's cold outside. Harriet did that. George didn't.